الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. This is lesson 11 in our reading of al-Risala al-Khushu, and in this lesson we're going to be taking a closer look at some of the wordings that we use in the prayer. And in this section, Imam al-Khadimi is going to concern himself mainly with the wording of the Fatiha, and he's going to be looking at different ways in which the Fatiha can be understood. And so in this particular section, he'll be offering specific meanings that underpin the Fatiha. And then in later sections, he provides alternatives as well. And so we'll be looking at some of the basic meanings of the Fatiha and how it can be understood in this section. And then we'll take more details in later sections. And so Imam al-Khadimi begins by stating تفصيل ترجمة المعاني, detailing the meanings essentially that underpin the Fatiha. And he says فإذا قلت البسم الله تنوي به التبرك، أي تقصد النفع الكثير والخير الجليل باسمه تعالى، ومن جملة ذلك التحفظ عن وساوس الشيطان وغوائل النفس الأمارة. And so he says, when you say Bismillah at the beginning of your prayer, then intend by it the seeking of blessing. Intend by it tabarruk. And specifically, he says, what you should intend is gaining benefit through this action, gaining good through this action by the mentioning of Allah's name before it. And from amongst the good that accrues from attaching one's action to the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and beginning one's action with the mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name is being preserved from the whisperings of the devil and from the dangers of the nafs that incites to evil. Now, the basmala is of course a very important practice. It's something that we are all accustomed to. We all recognize the importance of reciting Bismillah before our actions, specifically our noble actions. And the Prophet ﷺ said that every noble matter, kullu amrin dhibal, that does not begin with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is something that is cut off from blessings. And so we're taught from a very young age to recite the Bismillah before reciting the Quran, before eating, before various actions. And the ulama have very lengthy explanations regarding the Bismillah and regarding the various meanings that can be understood from this particular phrase. And so there are two perspectives that are worth mentioning over here. The first one is what Imam al-Khadimi is mentioning, this idea that the Bismillah is uttered in order to envelop one's action in blessing. And so what you do is you mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order for the act that you are performing to be blessed by the mention of that name. And so effectively what you're saying is that seeking blessings through the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I begin X action. Seeking blessing through the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I begin my prayer, I begin my recitation, I begin eating food, and so on and so forth. Another way the ulama understood the Bismillah is they say the ba in the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is for isti'ana. And what that means is it is seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's aid and assistance. And so effectively what you're saying is when you start your prayer, for example, you're saying that seeking the aid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I begin my prayer. Or if you're reciting the Quran and you say Bismillah before you recite it, you're saying seeking the aid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I begin this recitation of the Quran. Seeking the aid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I begin eating this food. And this meaning of Bismillah, effectively what it entails is that you are admitting to your own inability to actualize your actions. you are admitting your own inability to make your actions come to be. And you recognize through the phrase Bismillah that it is only through the might and the power and the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you are able to do any action that you are about to perform. And so the ba in Bismillah has been understood in these various ways. One is this idea of being enveloped, your action being enveloped in this blessing that comes by mentioning the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the other is to use it as an affirmation that one cannot begin any action except with the assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam al-Khadimi will mention other explanations for the Basmala in later sections, as I mentioned. And then we have Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. So then he says, وَعِنْدَ قَوْلِنَا الرحمن الرحيم تستشعر نعمه الدنيوية والأخروية غير المتناهية فلا جرم حينئذ ينبعث منك رجاء وتعظيم وخوف وهيبة ثم يستدعي ذلك شكر الله تعالى. Then he's mentioned the Basmala. Now he's telling us what we should think about when we are saying Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. What should we understand from this particular phrase? And so he says, with Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, you need to recognize and bring to mind the various worldly and next worldly benefits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Benefits that have no end. These are perpetual benefits and blessings that rain down upon you with every passing moment of your life. And when you think about this, when you think about the various blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you in this world and the blessings that He will give you in the next world, then this will result in the emergence of particular states, such as reverence for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fear and awe of Him and hope in what He has in store for you. And then this in turn will also bring about a state of shukr or thankfulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, of course, are two names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are immensely powerful names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that are filled with meaning. And the ulama have written books simply to elucidate the meanings that these two names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala convey. So over here, I just wanted to mention what Shaykh Keller states in his article on suffering and divine wisdom. And he says, explaining this phrase, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, he says, these opening words convey the mysterious secret of all created being, that its reality lies in the larger context in which it is articulated and has its existence. The most merciful, Ar-Rahman, denotes the penetration of divine mercy into everything in the cosmos, this world and the next, by bringing it out of the privation of non-being into the perfection of temporal being. It is a mighty mercy and the ontological basis of our servanthood. The most compassionate, Ar-Rahim, is an intensive form of the previous name that denotes a qualitative leap in the magnitude of this mercy, through a theophany to be fully manifest only in the next world, beyond death, for the sentient beings Allah loves, of mankind, jinn, angels, and any others. Its infinitude in degree is matched by its infinitude in time, or rather timelessness, extending as it does to eternity. And so over here, Shaykh is basically getting at some of the various ways in which the ulama understood Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. And so the ulama mention things like Ar-Rahman is the mercy that relates to both Muslims and non-Muslims. It is a mercy that relates to both this world and the next world. It is a mercy that relates to the basic blessings that we have in our lives, such as life itself. And so Ar-Rahman is the mercy that pervades all of the cosmos, as Shaykh Nu mentions. And it is the mercy due to which we have been given existence. The very reason why we exist, the very reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took us out from a state of non-existence and made us into existent entities was because of the manifestation of His being Ar-Rahman. And so the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Ar-Rahman, this refers to a mercy that pervades the entire cosmic realm and everything within it. Ar-Rahim, however, is a more specific form of mercy, something that is specific to the next world, something specific to the believers who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with. And so this mercy relates to the salvation that one is going to achieve in the next life, the forgiveness of one's sins, the eternal felicity that we are going to enjoy in the next world. And this is why Imam al-Khadimi, when he discusses and tries to explain what we should think about when we are saying Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, is we need to think about both this worldly and next worldly blessings that have no limit. Because the name Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim basically encompass all of the blessings that we enjoy, and all of the blessings that inshallah we will enjoy in the next world. And again, there are very detailed discussions on these two names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which we will not get into the details of, but recognizing that you are uttering a phrase that mentions these two names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that mentions Ar-Rahman, a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that indicates His being that gave us existence, His being that took this world and everything within it from a state of non-existence into a state of existence. Then Ar-Rahim, the mercy that will envelop the believing men and women in the next life, that will give them eternal felicity, eternal joy. These are things that we need to keep in our head when we are reciting these phrases and recognize what they tell us about our Lord. Then Imam al-Khadimi goes to Alhamdulillah. He says, فَنَحْمَدُهُ تَعَالَى بِقَوْلِهِ Alhamdulillah. And hamd is basically praising someone for the beautiful characteristics that they possess. And when we say Alhamdulillah, we are saying that all praise is owed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All praise is established for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because He is perfection. His sifat, His being, is one of perfection. And so He is someone who is entitled to, who is owed all the praise that one can give Him. فإذا قلت الرحمن الرحيم تحضر في قلبك أنواع لطفه فينبعث به رجاؤك. And again he says, when you think about Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, when you state this phrase, again bring to your heart the various blessings and subtle expressions of love and gentleness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has showered upon you. And then this will further engender a state of hope within you. Then he says, وبقوله مالك يوم الدين تخوف لهول يوم الجزاء والحساب وتعظيم لأنه لا مالك إلا هو. And so when you say مالك يوم الدين, the owner of the day of judgment, and then this should bring about within you a state of fear for this dreaded day and a sense of reverence to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there is no one else who has this ownership, has this subjugation of these realms, within his power as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. Then we have وَتُجَدِّدُ الْإِخْلَاصِ بِقَوْلِهِ إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. And then when you say إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, you alone we worship, then recall and reaffirm your sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because over here, this phrase, it's framed in a way where you are expressing that there is no one else. There's absolutely no one else who I worship. And worship refers to the act of, it is the utmost degree of submission that one can express, the utmost degree of subservience and humility and humbleness that one can express towards another. And this is only reserved for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. والعجز والاحتياج والتبرؤ عن الحول والقوة بقوله وإياك نستعين، وتحقق أنه لا تتحصل العبادة إلا بعونه، وأن العبادة أمر عظيم لا يمكن حصوله إلا بإعانة منه تعالى. And then what you do is, after you mention that worship is only due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you express your utter lack of strength and ability by saying وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ, and that it is you who we seek aid from. And part of connecting وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ with إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ is an affirmation that even the acts of worship that you perform cannot be performed without the aid and permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that this immense act of ibadah is something that you can only attain, you can only carry out with the aid and assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why Ibn Ata'illah, in his hikam, one of the very beautiful things he says is that, is it not enough of a reward for you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen you as someone who performs acts of worship for him? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you the tawfiq to get up for prayer, and to perform a ruku, and to perform a sajda, and to give charity, and to do all these acts of worship that He has commanded you. It is enough of a reward that He has selected you as someone who puts his head on the ground 5 times a day in submission to Him. This is a great favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This in itself is a reward, that He has made us people who believe in Him, people who submit to Him, people who affirm His oneness, people who affirm His attributes and perfection, people who try and take seriously the commands that He has given us. This is a very noble rank that a human being can possess. And of course, over here, one of the interesting things is that this idea of ibadah comes after we've affirmed various other things for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How does the Fatiha go? Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa Iyyaka nasta'in. We begin the Fatiha in what way? We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by affirming this fact that all praise is owed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because He is the perfect being. Then we mention Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, the idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who created us all. His mercy pervades all things. His mercy is something that has given us our existence, both Muslim and non-Muslim, both things that are animated or things that are inanimated. Whether it's the stars or the moon or the clouds or rocks or human beings or animals, Ar-Rahman, it is that mercy that has brought those things into existence. And then Ar-Rahim, that mercy that is specific to the mu'mineen, and which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will manifest most fully in the next life. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy generally relating to everything that we enjoy in this world, from our salaries to our nourishment, to our homes, having a roof over ourselves, to our health. This is all from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we express this, that Allah is Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. Then we mention this idea of Him being the owner of the next world, the owner of the Day of Judgment, affirming thereby our ultimate return to Him. That things begin with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Him creating us. Then ultimately we return back to Him on a day where He is the King of all kings. And then after affirming all of this, after affirming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being someone to whom all praise is due, that He is the Rabb, or the Lord of the worlds. And Rabbul Alameen is also a very interesting phrase that Imam al-Khadimi does not address over here, but Rabbul Alameen literally means, again, someone who has taken the world and put it into the state of existence, and slowly, step by step. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not confined to a time and place, but from our perspective, what's happening is our wills are all being directed towards a specific direction. And Rabb is related to the word tarbiyah. And we all understand tarbiyah. It's a very common word that we use. Tarbiyah is when you give someone you give someone education or guidance, or you train someone. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the Rabb of the Alameen is someone who's directing the wills of all of created things in a specific direction, and giving them signs so that their wills can be redirected towards the Lord of the worlds. And then after affirming all of this, we say iyya na'budu, that you alone we worship. Because what we're saying now effectively is, we've recognized who you are. You are the one who is due all praise. You are the master of the worlds. You are the master of the Day of Judgment. You are the most merciful. You are the creator of everything. You are the one who directs the will of everything. You are the controller of everything. And now we will express this idea that this is why you are due worship, and no one but you is due worship. Iyyaka na'budu. And no one but you is anyone or anything we can turn to for aid. Wa iyyaka nasta'in. And so there's a very beautiful flow over here in terms of affirming the reality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and recognizing who He is. And then the natural result of that is what? That we submit to Him in worship. وَإِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. Then Imam al-Khadimi says, تُعَيِّنْ حاجتك ولا تطلب إلا ما هو أهم فتقول اهدنا الصراط المستقيم الذي يسوقنا إلى جواره ورضاه. Then specify your need and do not seek from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except that which is most important. And so state, guide us on the straight path, the path that will lead us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to His pleasure. وزده شرحا وتأكيدا واستشهد بالذين أفاض الله عليهم نعمة الهداية من النبيين والصديقين والشهداء والصالحين دون الذين غضب عليهم من الكفار والزائغين من اليهود والنصارى. And then increase this and emphasize this even more by citing those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has showered His favors upon in terms of guidance, from the prophets and the siddiqeen and the martyrs and the righteous, as opposed to those upon whom the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has fallen, from the disbelievers and from those who have transgressed the limits, from the Jews and the Christians. And of course by this he means اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Then you say صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. ثم التمس الإجابة وقل آمين. And then you say Ameen in order for your request to be answered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in hopes of it being answered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so This was his explanation of the Fatiha. Very brief. It's just, again, tips on what one should be thinking about when one is reciting these words. Because as Imam al-Khadimi mentioned earlier, having hudur al-qalb, having presence of heart in the prayer, is so intimately connected to being aware of what you are saying in prayer and to whom you are speaking to in prayer. And if you do not have an awareness, a basic awareness of what these phrases and expressions and words mean that you are uttering in prayer, what they tell you about the one you are standing in front of, what they tell you about what you are seeking out of this prayer, then of course your khushu is going to be lacking in the prayer. And in the next sections, as I mentioned, the reason why we haven't gone into too much detail regarding these words is because Imam al-Khadimi is going to be mentioning other ways one can understand the Fatiha as well, and we'll look at those in the next lesson. Now, one of the beautiful things about the Fatiha, of course, is that the ulama mentioned the Fatiha is essentially, it gathers the whole of the Quran. And the entirety of the Quran is basically an explanation, an unwrapping, a further elucidation of the contents that we find in the Fatiha, of the meanings that we find within the wording of the Fatiha. And so Imam al-Tibi, one of the great scholars of tafsir in our Sunni tradition, he says that when we look at the Fatiha, we note that it gathers basically four of the main types of sciences, or not sciences, but four of the main types of knowledge that basically underpins the entire religion. The first, he says, is ilm al-usul. And ilm al-usul means the knowledge of the foundations of this faith. And the foundations of this faith are what? It is knowledge of Allah and His attributes. And this is indicated by the verse of the Fatiha, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Right? These phrases of the Fatiha basically affirm and teach us about knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about who He is, and about His attributes. Then, from amongst the foundational knowledge of our religion is knowledge of the prophets. And this is what is intended by An'amta alayhim in the Fatiha. Then we have knowledge of the next life. And this is what is intended with the statement of the Fatiha, Maliki Yawmiddin. Right? So these phrases and expressions within the Fatiha, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, indicates knowledge of Allah and His attributes. And Amta alayhim indicates foremost the prophetic figures. And then Maliki Yawmiddin indicates and expresses knowledge of the next life. And so the Fatiha over here is gathering the ilm al-usul, or knowledge of the foundational pillars and aspects of our deen. Then we have ilm al-furu', and ilm al-furu' are basically knowledge of issues related to acts of worship, right? Issues related to acts of worship. They are not foundational creedal matters. And over here, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He tell us to recite in Fatiha? Iyyaka na'budu. And ibadah is basically the furu' of our religion. Then thirdly, we have the knowledge that perfects our action and perfects our states. And this is ilm al-akhlaq. And over here, Imam al-Tibi mentions وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ إِهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ is an indication towards this type of knowledge. We are not simply asking Allah to aid us in our worship. We are not simply expressing the desire to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to the straight path, to the balanced path, to be perfectly balanced human beings. And this is a state of kamal, or perfection, that a human can attain. Then finally we have knowledge related to past nations, knowledge related to the events that have preceded us, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs us about throughout the Quran. And over here, again, the Fatiha indicates this knowledge by saying, أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِينَ. That, oh Allah, guide us on the path of those whom you have blessed, not those whom you are angered by or angered with. And so the whole Quran is basically trying to unravel this basic format that the Fatiha has set down. It is trying to give us more details regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His attributes, more details regarding the prophets, more details regarding the next day. It is giving us details about our ibadat, iyya na'budu, by going into the ahkam of salah and zakah and Sawm and Hajj and so on and so forth. It is teaching us about ilm al-akhlaq. It is teaching us, the rest of the Quran is trying to unpack what is Sirat al-Mustaqim. What does it mean to be on this straight and balanced path? And then it is constantly referencing the events that happened in the past to other nations in order to teach us. It is telling us about who were those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favored and who were those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was angered by. And so the entirety of the Quran is basically a tafsir of the Fatiha. And this is how the ulama understood it. And so with that, inshallah, we will end the session. And again, in the next class, we'll look at the Fatiha again, but from other angles that Imam al-Khadimi will bring. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.